Hello, FireTech 102 students. Okay, so this video is going to be our part 3 of fire suppression, which is chapter 14 in our textbook. And so for fire suppression, we're going to break this down into vehicle fires, and we're just going to kind of isolate it to vehicle fires. Then the last part, we'll look at exterior ground cover fires. We'll take a look at the wildland environment a little bit with fire behavior there and kind of move in that direction. So for vehicle fires, this is going to correspond with page 711 through 720 in your textbook, and it's going to cover slides 104 through slides 148. So we'll go ahead and get started here with this. Okay, so vehicle fires are among some of the most common types of fires that we get. Collision, malfunction of the vehicle's propulsion system, an intentional act, or arson related fire. We get a lot of those in our cities where people will steal a car, or they'll have something, some other nefarious motive, and they'll light the car on fire. So we want to make sure that we're wearing our full PPE and our breathing apparatus. So there was a time where people didn't wear breathing apparatuses on car fires. Just considered that we were outside in the outside environment, didn't really need it. But you get into some smoky conditions there, the toxic gases that are produced, and now if you get a vehicle that's fully involved, you may not be aware that it's an electric vehicle, and the gases that it's putting off, the toxic vapors, are much worse than that of a combustion type engine. So we want to be aware of the smoke and the toxic vapors that are put off of these vehicles. So always, when you start talking about your SCBA and your PPE, it's really just a good idea to get in the habit of wearing those. Unless you're on some kind of vegetation fire or some kind of outdoor fire, but any kind of structure fire, vehicle fire, it's a good idea to wear your SCBA, mask up, because you just don't know what's burning, including dumpster fires. When you go on dumpster fires, right? When we get dumpster fires, I go off on a little tangent here. But when we talk about dumpster fires, you never know what people are going to throw away, right? People just throw away everything, even things that they're not supposed to throw away. So that could pose like a toxic atmosphere for you. And just because we're flooding a dumpster and allowing it to drain doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to breathe in some of those products, and you never know what's in there. So there's my tangent on wearing your SCBA and your mask and your full PPE on vehicle fires, dumpster fires, and then obviously on structure fires. Fire protection at vehicle fires. So it can range from someone with a portable fire extinguisher to the crew pulling a hose line and having a fully charged hose line, opening up that vehicle and getting in there. It's recommended that at least 2 firefighters equipped with full PPE and SCBA have at least 1.5 inch or larger hose line charged and ready for use. We use 1 3/4 hose lines. So that's what our hose lines are that we're going to pull off of our engine. We also have rubber booster lines, but you're not really supposed to use those for the vehicle fires. So there's some agencies will have like a hose line on the front of their engine that they specifically use. It's a shorter. It's not 150 feet. It's a shorter length of hose that they'll have preloaded, and they'll use those for your vehicle fires. Modern vehicles use a variety of power sources, sometimes in combinations where you have your hybrids. So be aware, right? If you have some kind of battery system along with your combustion fuel type system. Vehicle scene safety. The first action upon arrival at a vehicle accident is to decide if the incident scene will necessitate traffic being diverted and request assistance. We always do that. We always get our police department for traffic. On the freeways, we'll send 2 engines in different directions on the freeway, and we'll use one apparatus to block for the other one. So it'll create a buffer zone, right? So there's been several incidents where people have shortened up their careers or got seriously injured because they were hit by cars while they're fighting vehicle fires. So we want to make sure that we create a safe environment. Highway patrol or the local police station, police department, or sheriff's department, wherever you're at, get them there. They can provide traffic. They can block traffic. Give you a safe buffer zone. You want to follow that traffic incident management system guidelines in In Fire Tech 103, we talk about that. We talk about that buffer zone and the zone that needs to be created there. So you'll get a little bit of that in your 103 class. Or also in your provincial or territorial emergency responders traffic incident management guidelines. So remember, this is a international book. IFSTA is an international agency, so where you hear like a provenance, we don't really have those here in the U.S. But they do have them in other countries like Canada. So use those so that we protect the scene for traffic. So we give ourselves a good working zone, a good safe working zone, right? You'd rather have a car hit an engine that's parked, and then you have a buffer zone between you and that engine than hit one of our people, right? Once we establish that safe scene to work, we go back to our main priorities, right? Our priorities are firefighter safety and life safety, incident stabilization, and then property conservation. So with vehicle fires, we get a lot of runoff. You get fuel, you get other hazards, and when they run off into the drain. We got to make some notifications. We're protected from some of the legal issues with runoff into the storm drains because we're engaging in emergency operations. Vehicle scene prep. The incident conditions may require extrication. So this may be the cause of a vehicle incident. And because you have that vehicle incident, somebody needs to be extricated, but you also have fire suppression that needs to go on, contaminant of fuel leaking. So if we can get an engine that can create like a dam or a dike or a diversion around the storm drains, that's always good. A good secondary thought so that we're containing whatever runoff we have. All right. Before attacking the fire or commencing with extrication, you want to isolate the vehicle from any ignition sources or eliminate ignition sources. You want to try to do that. Stabilize the vehicle if possible. Control any down power lines. If there's down power lines, be very cautious because those down power lines are charged and they could be very hazardous to you. So then address any additional hazards that you may have, right? Okay, so avoiding common injuries at the scenes. When we look over here to the right, you have this diagram, right? So you have your vehicle direction of travel, okay, going forward, going backwards, and then you have some hazards that are associated with, right? You have your front bumper struts, your hood struts, your trunk struts, rear bumper struts that you can possibly run into, and those can be launched from the vehicle, right? So they can kill or injure anyone in the path of travel. So you want to be cognizant of those. You want to be cognizant of airbags as well. So airbags can go off, all right? We do want to get the hood open. We do want to get the trunk open to check for fire going from either the passenger space into the engine compartment or into the storage compartment or the trunk, or if it starts in the trunk, getting into the passenger space, getting into the engine. We want to make sure that fire is fully extinguished. And also, as a fire goes, the tires heat up, the tires can blow. It's very loud, especially if you get those larger diesel trucks, right? And they get that constant pressure. So as they heat up, those tires can explode. So you want to be mindful of that. Particularly if you have like some heavier equipment, like tractors, like heavy tractors, bulldozers, heavy equipment like that. You want to make sure that you're understanding what can happen with those tires as well. All right. Controlling fuel leaks. Fuel may be found leaking from the tanks or the fuel lines. That can be a risk. You want to extinguish the fire first, and then you can address the broken fuel lines, right? How much fuel is going to leak out of that vehicle? Only that's what's in the tank. When we start getting traffic accidents with larger tractor trailers or trucks that are they're taking cargo from one place to another on the freeways. One of the things I always ask is how much fuel is in your tank. So if you look at tanks that are on the side, those are called saddle tanks, and they can have 100 gallons in each of those saddle tanks. So if they're punctured, we'll want to seal them. But remember, like wherever that hole is, the fuel will only leak down past the hole, and then it'll be stable in there. But couple of different things. If you have a fuel line, you can use you can crimp it with a pair of pliers, plug it with rubber, plastic, or wooden plugs. Golf tees work great in some of the fuel lines. And then if you have a fuel tank, we use what we call golf ball and football plugs. And what they are they're basically they're little plugs, and they're about the size of a golf ball or the size of a football. That's where they get their name. And then Cromwell makes these. You can look them up. And then you dip them in water, or you put water in their bag. They go through a reaction. You plug it over the hole that's leaking, and then now it goes through a chemical reaction and it seals that hole, right? So there's several different things that you'll have in a kit where you can plug the leak. So again, is the fire at the leak, or is the fire knocked down and then you plug the leak? Okay, so you want to take care of that fire component first. Selecting the hose stream for vehicle fires. And most passenger vehicle fires, 1 or 2 1.5 or 1.75 lines are used to extinguish fire. Most of the time, 1 is the only thing that we need. For larger vehicles, tractor trailers, or larger hand lines, a 2.5 or multiple hand lines. Really depends on what your department's procedures are, your standard operating procedures. So you'll learn. Most of the time, you're just going to be deploying 1 1.75 hand line to get those out. Puts out a lot of water. May be necessary to use defensive fire tactics, deploying unstaffed master stream devices, depending on it, or isolating and denying entry to the area, especially when we now start to talk about your electric vehicles. And as I mentioned in the previous lecture, it started talking about the battery storage system from the lithium-ion batteries, and those lithium-ion batteries and their byproducts were creating an isolated area because of the off-gassing of those vehicles. Maintaining flash protection to counter the risk of a fire starting in an automobile accident. So our policy is, when there's a vehicle accident, the vehicle accident requires extrication. We're going to have 2 of our firefighters suited up, just like these are, with a charged hose line. That's our policy, so that as they're working with their extrication tools, if a fire starts, then the handline crew can knock down that fire. All right. Firefighters should monitor the scene for any indication of fire and be prepared to extinguish one. Also, if you have people that are extricating because of a vehicle crash, look around for fluids on the ground, because those fluids can ignite. All they need is an ignition source. So you want to have that handline ready to go to protect your victim, and also to protect your extrication team if needed. Okay, vehicle suppression. So when we want to approach, this is showing that approach at a 45-degree angle because of the hydraulic or the pneumatic struts that you see that can launch, right? That's what it's talking about, right? So we want to position our apparatus uphill, upwind, upstream of the fire to avoid standing in the path of running fuels downhill. And try to keep out of the smoke, right? If you have that wind at your back, it's kind of pushing a lot of that smoke away from you, even though you're going to be kind of getting into that smoke to make sure that you can get that fire fully extinguished. Position your hand line between the vehicle and the burning part of the vehicle and the exposures. So if you have fire in the engine compartment, right, your exposures are the passenger space and then also your storage space or your trunk. Stabilize the vehicle as soon as possible. We don't always do that for just a vehicle fire. The vehicle is usually pretty stable on all fours. And then approach fire at 45-degree angle from the side of the vehicle to avoid potential injury from exploding hydraulic or pneumatic struts. Extinguish any fire near the vehicle or near the vehicle occupants first. Okay, and then hopefully we get the vehicle out and you don't have people inside burning. And then issue an all clear when occupants get out of the vehicle. Extinguish any ground fire around or under the vehicle, and then extinguish any remaining fire in and around the vehicle. Backup hose line can be deployed if needed. It's not often that we see a backup hose line on a vehicle fire, but it is something that you want to consider. And then if you have portable extinguishers, that could take care of some engine compartment and some alternative fuel. Engine compartment fires and some alternative fuel vehicle fires. So we apply water to cool the combustible metals. that are exposed to fire. So if a combustible metal becomes involved, apply large volumes of water to protect the adjacent combustibles while applying your Class D agent to the burning if that metal is not suitable to be extinguished with water. Some of the other hazards that we have, call them extraordinary hazards, that are going to require you to isolate the area and request the assistance of a hazmat team. Large capacity saddle fuel tanks. You'll see those. They're big circle tanks, and they're usually on the side of the vehicle. They're either at or near where the step is to get into the vehicle for the driver and the passenger, or they're like behind it. That's your common place for it. And they're pretty large. Some hold up to as much as a couple 100 gallons, all right? Any kind of pressurized natural gas tanks, that should be a sign on the vehicle. You extinguish the fire. And you want to be careful, because if you think about this, there's a fire that LA City had in Wilmington. And when you have natural gas tanks, or you have pressurized cylinders that have a fuel source in them, LNG, CNG, whatever that natural gas source is, or whatever that gas source is, propane, whatever, you can, if it's relieving on there's a relief disc there. If that's burst and it's relieving, sometimes it's best to just allow that to leak off. We had a motorhome that was leaking propane, and there's a kit that your hazmat teams will have. They can attach that kit to the propane cylinder, and then you have a line for that gas to flow through, and then you have like a metal piece that looks like a candle. We'll call it a candle. And then you burn it off. So you can actually see it burned off, and it's away from the vehicle. And then you're burning off, especially those gases that, sorry about that. So you'll burn off some of those gases, especially the gases that you can see that sink, right? Because if you have pressurized tanks and they have a gas in them, or those cylinders that have a gas in them that's heavier than air, it's going to stay low to the ground, and it could cause a hazard for us. All right. Overhaul. Once the fire has been controlled, conduct overhaul as quickly as possible. So you want to check the passenger space. You want to check the engine compartment, and then you also want to check any storage compartments like the trunk for fires. Be careful of the airbags, right? If the airbags have not gone off, they may go off as you open up the vehicle. So you want to be careful of those, because if the airbags go off and you're inside the vehicle looking around and the airbag hits you, it's going to hurt. All right. And all the different areas now that have airbags that deploy. Okay. So above the doors, the steering wheel, the dashboard, anything that's on the side, any of those curtain type airbags that could deploy. All right. Okay, moving along. Engine or truck compartment fires, or engine or trunk compartment fires. You want to gain access to that. Sometimes you'll cut it open with a rotary saw. Sometimes it might be easier if you can actually get in the vehicle. If it's an engine compartment fire and you can get in the vehicle, be careful of the airbags, and you just release the hood so that now you can open up that hood as they're knocking down that fire. Same thing with the trunk. Are you able to release the trunk, or do you got to cut it open? A lot of times we'll just cut it open. If you can't get to those levers to do the least amount of damage, then you have some other forcible entry tools that you'll use in order to make access to those compartments. And again, cool those areas where you could have like the projectiles that can explode out, or even like that tire area. Methods to access the hood or the trunk: a pry hook, or a trunk free with a Halligan or a crowbar. Remove the metal around the key or latch with a rotary saw. You just basically cut an area, you cut out that locking mechanism, and then you lift up the metal if you're lifting up the hood, or same thing with the trunk. Approach from the side with the appropriate tool to open the trunk, and then you can direct your hose streams under the car. You can use a piercing nozzle to pierce the hood or trunk, which is not common. We just get into those. You start knocking down that fire, and as you get that fire knocked down, you start to remove the hazard, and then you can go ahead and open up that hood or trunk and then finish extinguishing the fire. In many compartment fires, there are options for controlling the fire before opening the hood, such as directing the hose stream through the grill, driving a piercing nozzle through, which we don't use. That's not very common. And then again, not a safe tactic for a hybrid or electric vehicle, because where are those components going? Where's the battery stored in those? Sometimes it might be best to just allow an electric vehicle to burn. If you're in an area where you can create a safe zone, you can get your hazmat team there to air monitor so that the byproducts aren't flowing into an area where it's going to make people sick or expose people. And then making or cutting an opening large enough for the hose stream to be introduced. Using a pry tool to create an opening between the hood and the fender, and directing a straight stream or narrow fog through that opening. So there's several different ways you can do it. You'll learn a lot of that as you go through your training, and then as you get assigned to your engine and truck companies when you get hired and you get into your probationary period. So yeah, piercing, like when you have a hybrid or you have an electric vehicle, there's, again, that as the name suggests, right, it's electric. So there's an electrocution factor that goes along with that. Okay. And there's also like the EVs, right? Most of it's lithium ion battery is what we're finding. And so there's hazard associated with that. There's hazard associated with compressed gas in some kind of cylinder. Passenger compartment fires. When fighting fire in passenger compartment, you want to have that appropriate nozzle stream and pattern for the situation. So you want to attempt to open the door first. Does the driver have the key? Is the window open? If you can't get in normally by opening the door, then break a window. You want to have that fire with a medium fog pattern in there. So you want to attack that way. Undercarriage fires, there's a couple of different methods that you can have. If the hazard prevents you from getting close, use a straight stream to reach underneath the vehicle like it shows here in the picture on the right. You can basically direct your straight stream down on the ground, deflect water up towards the underside of the vehicle, and then opening the hood and stream through that compartment itself. All right. Alternative fuel vehicles. So alternative fuels create different types of risks to us. They should have some kind of indicator on the vehicle itself, or some kind of logo that would tell you which type of vehicle it is. Obviously, there's some cars that we know, Tesla, for example, right? You know that that's an EV, so you know what that's going to be. You know how that vehicle is going to operate. And there's several other brands of electric vehicles that you know. But then when it comes to your compressed gases in the cylinders, it's sometimes hard to notice like which vehicles are compressed gas, where those cylinders are, and what type of gas is actually in those cylinders. Okay, so you want to try the best you can to look for any indicator that will help you become aware of the hazards. So again, we're still attacking the fires, knocking those fires out, but we want to be aware of what type of hazards they pose, right? Some of the alternative fuels that you'll have are the natural gas, CNG, LNG, LPG, right? It's just that liquefied petroleum gas, your electric or hybrid, your ethanol, methanol, biodiesel, and then hydrogen. Hydrogen's a big one. Toyota has a plant down in the Port of Long Beach, and their vehicles are all hydrogen. So you're seeing more hydrogen fueling stations, right? And any of these that are compressed type gases, they're going to have to be stored in some kind of cylinder, and you may have that cylinder fail. Okay. There's no national requirement in the US or Canada for markings to indicate the type of fuel used to power cars, trucks, or buses. So as a result, you may have no idea what that fuel source is, right? So some states may regulate that, or provinces, but you may not know, right? Sometimes you'll see clean energy on the vehicle, especially if it's a bus, but you may not know. We had a vehicle accident. There was no fire in the vehicle, but it was a tractor trailer, and it used a compressed gas. And so the driver didn't even know. The driver thought it used diesel, but it didn't. You could hear it because you could hear the gas venting from those cylinders. Natural gas vehicle, CNG or LNG. Here's a diamond logo that's usually affixed to the front or the rear of that. The fuel tanks are usually located in the trunk area or they're under side panels. I drove one of these. I had a city vehicle that was a CNG vehicle, and it had it like along the side where the passengers would get in, the rear passengers. So you have the driver's seat, the passenger seat, and then you have the rear passenger seats behind the driver and the other passenger. And that's where those tanks were. And there was a shutoff valve there. So you want to know if you have a shutoff there, right? So these things are stored under high pressure and they can rupture if they're exposed to fire, or also if they have a relief valve and that relief valve is working. You hit it with your hose line, and if it somehow freezes because it's under pressure and it's coming out through that relief valve, you could cause it could cause that to rupture. All right. Pressure relief devices and vent and fuel shutoff valve may be located in the wheel well, but it should be labeled where that is. If there's no fire visible, then you'll want to use a gas detector to locate the leak, the shutoff valves, and then eliminate your ignition sources. Stay clear of any vapor clouds that you might have detected. If you do have fire, you can allow the fuel to burn itself out. If it's in like if it's in an area where it's not impinging on the actual tanks themselves, you can extinguish that fire and then you handle the leaks. Okay, so you're going to train on these things, you're going to learn, but these are good, helpful tactics there. Use water or foam to extinguish if necessary. Use a fog stream to disperse your vapor cloud if you see one, or if it has one. And then you want to avoid contact with any kind of high velocity jet of escaping gases. LNG is stored in a liquid state by cooling to negative 260 degrees Fahrenheit in a double-walled, vacuum-insulated pressurized tank. So it's lighter than water and has a vapor cloud that's heavier than air. So if it's lighter than water, it's going to float on top of water, right? If it's got a vapor cloud that's heavier than air, it's going to sink. Okay, so frost on the fuel tank exterior indicates that the tank is failing because it's coming out and it's so cold, it's stored so cold. If there is no fire or leak, stabilize the vehicle, set the emergency brake, chock the tires, turn the ignition off, and then shut off the gas cylinder valve at the handle, or with the handle at the shutoff. Tactics for fires or leaks with LNG: avoid contact with the LNG, stay clear of the vapor cloud, shut off the ignition to stop the fuel flow to a leak or to a fire, and then you can use a Purple K dry chem agent or some high expansion foam on whatever the surface fuel is going to be. You can use sand or dirt to prevent the LNG from entering the storm drain as that liquid runs off. Right, we want to try to protect that storm drain. If you have a second crew there, you can assign them to do that. LPG vehicle may be marked with a logo similar to the CNG. And here's some tactics that we can use for, LPG vehicles. Could be marked similar to the CNG. Use a gas detector to determine leaks, isolate the leak from the ignition source. So again, you may or may not have one that you may have to call out your hazmat team to help you with the detectors. You may just have a simple gas monitor on your apparatus, but maybe it doesn't go into whatever type of fuel you're dealing with. Allow the fire to extinguish itself. So in these fires, when you have those stored gases or you have that stored liquid, once the fuel is gone, then the fire typically will go out, unless you have ordinary combustibles, or like let's say you have a tractor trailer and you have a fire at the tank. That tank is venting and you can see the flame from that tank venting. Once the tank is empty, the fire should go out, unless the fire is impinged on whatever the cargo is that they're transporting, or it gets into the passenger space. At that point, right now, you have an ordinary combustible fuel. Once these fuels have dissipated, or they've all the fuel is consumed. Direct your hose streams at the top of the LPG tank to provide adequate cooling or a high expansion foam on the surface of the fuel, and then stay clear of any of the vapor clouds. Electric or hybrid, they should have certain visible indicators, such as a vehicle name. So we have a lot of common names of vehicle. You know, Ford's got that that SUV Mustang one. I forgot the name of it, but you know, obviously Tesla has one, and then it seems like all the manufacturers now have them. You should have some kind of distinguishing mark on them that lets you know that it's an EV or that it's a hybrid. And then they usually have a vehicle name, they have a logo on it, they have a charging port that's typically on the side or the front of the vehicle, and it's got a different profile than what you would use to put gas in your car, than where your gas tank is at. And gas tanks are typically at the rear, right? Some of the cars will have them at the front. The batteries could be located in your engine compartment, in your trunk area, or under the vehicle. So that's the biggest thing, is you may not know where those battery banks are located. When the engine is running, could be silent, right? So a lot of times you won't even hear these EVs going when they're going forward. You'll hear them when they back up, or they kind of have that high-pitched hum that you could hear when they're running, but they're very quiet. So you may not know that they're even running. You might not know that the engine is running. Most electric and hybrid electric vehicles also contain a 12-volt battery system that has a separate battery and a separate wiring harness for other parts of the vehicle. EVs, they run solely on electricity that's stored in their batteries, and they have to be recharged periodically. So there's many different types, designs, and locations of vehicle battery packs. You'll want to train on those, right? There's a lot of classes out there that are specific to EVs now. There's a lot of EV training that I suggest you take a look at. These may be equipped with different methods to isolate or shut off the high voltage systems, and due to different system designs, it may take an extended period of time for energy in the system to dissipate. So just because you shut it off doesn't mean the energy is all gone. So you don't want to cut the orange high voltage cable due to electrocution. Blue and yellow colored cables, they also present an electrocution hazard, but they don't carry the high voltage. So if you're not certain, don't cut them. All right. Wear your full PPE. If you haven't been trained on how to cut them, or you're not certain, don't cut them, right? So we definitely want to make sure that we act within our training. Wear your full PPE, use insulated tools, water or foam to extinguish the fires, and then specific recommended extinguishing agents for battery pack fires. So there's times now where we're just letting the vehicles burn, right? There's blankets that you can throw over them. They have like these fake keys. And basically what they do is they plug into the charging port, and they're supposed to de-energize them, but you just never know, right? So you're constantly changing, because the technology for these electric vehicles and a lot of the alternative fuels, the technology has outpaced the safety factors, right? So we're still catching up from a safety point of view on these electric vehicles and these alternative fuel vehicles. So a lot of training out there, and I'd advise you to be able to take whatever training comes your way for these types of vehicles, because there's a lot of cities that are going green, and there's a lot of areas where you're going to see an increased number of electric and alternative fuel vehicles. Hybrid considerations, they combine the battery powered systems with gasoline, diesel, biodiesel, and natural gas to run your engines. So some of them use the roof mounted photovoltaic solar panel as a power source. Some the shut off power with the ignition, or power switch and remove the ignition key. And then if you have a keyless start, you push the button that starts it, locate the keyring remote, and move it 20 feet or more away from the vehicle to ensure that the vehicle turns off. So you want to understand how these work and how to shut these vehicles off. Some emergency scene considerations. In emergency situations where there's no fire visible, secure the vehicle, chalk the wheels, turn the ignition off, and remove the key. That's always good. If you have a visible smoke, make sure that you have your PPE and SCBA on, because fumes are toxic until air monitoring indicates that they are not, that the concentration is so low that it's not going to be necessarily harmful anymore. So we want to air monitor. Do not approach the vehicle if it's on fire or there is arcing underneath the hood. Establish scene security and protect your exposures. Then avoid contact with all fluids because they may include the battery acid that can cause injuries. And also, you're going to have to decon your turnouts when you get through there because of the toxic gas byproducts. Lithium-ion batteries in vehicles that's susceptible to that thermal runaway. Like I said, those vehicles heat up. They get to a point where those battery packs or those battery banks, they're not going to cool down. And when they go into runaway, if you don't isolate them from the other packs, the other ones will start going into runaway. Okay. Water is the recommended extinguishing agent at this point. Requires direct application of large quantities of water to the battery. So it's going to cool it, but it disrupts that thermal runaway, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that vehicle is going to stop, or that those batteries are going to stop going into that runaway. So it'll cool it down and cool that temperature down. But we had a fire with a bus that was an EV bus, and the moment they stopped putting water in that area, those batteries heated right back up because you weren't stopping that runaway process. Firefighters may experience electric shock at the nozzle since the water conducts electricity back towards the hose operators. Have not seen that yet. Not to say it doesn't happen, but again, just be cautious as you're putting water on those batteries. Stranded energy. Even when the fires are extinguished, damaged batteries still store energy, and that's known as your stranded energy. So applying water does not de-energize a battery, right? So it's not uncommon for batteries to reignite while in transit on a tow truck or after the vehicle wreckage has been delivered to a tow yard or impound. So when you're doing extrication activities, you may want to apply water to the battery while extrication activities are ongoing if it's safe to do so. Okay, so a consideration again. Resources for responding to EV fires. Firefighters need access to manufacturers' emergency response guides to electrical vehicles that you encounter. So if you can look it up on your phone, or if you actually have a guide for it, that's a good thing. You want to, if you can get the maker or the brand and then the type of vehicle that it is, they'll have some recommendations on how to de-energize those. You can use a thermal imager to identify battery locations, since the battery will be hotter than all of the surrounding parts of the vehicle. Especially if secondary fires around the battery have been extinguished, then now you've extinguished the fire because you've extinguished the ordinary combustibles, but you still have the EV batteries to worry about. So then you can see with your imager what the temperature is on those batteries. Ethanol and methanol, those are gas blends. They're water soluble, which means they mix. They're electrically conductive, clear liquids that have a slight gasoline odor. They'll use the same fuel tanks as a conventional gasoline or conventional combustible engine. So vehicles using these blends may not have a logo. You may not know. And if there's no fire visible or no fire is visible or leak is detected, again, secure the vehicle, chock the tires, turn the ignition off. If you do have a fuel leak, use caution and use your full PPE and have hose lines deployed and charged. And then if the vehicle is leaking fuel or on fire, get a control zone. And then request your hazmat team to respond because that is a hazardous material. Biodiesel is a blend of liquids made from natural plants and diesel fuel. So it's a yellow liquid with the odor of a cooking oil, but it's not toxic, which is good. It's biodegradable, and then it's sulfur free. So it's slightly lighter than water, which means it's going to float. Has a flash point around 266 degrees Fahrenheit. So think about that. It's used in vehicles designed for diesel fuel, but there's no logos that are required to be put on it, so you won't know if it's a diesel or you may not know if it's diesel, gasoline, or even biodiesel. So again, control the leak per your SOPs if that's what you have. Request a hazmat team if needed. If the vehicle is on fire, use a dry chem, CO2, water fog spray, or foam to extinguish it. And then hydrogen. That's colorless, odorless, non-toxic, and it's energy efficient. Its ignition temperature is 932 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's got a flammability range between 4 and 75%. You can't see this flame, so you want to have your thermal imager. All right, so this is the problem with hydrogen: is you could have fire in a vehicle that has hydrogen, but it could be burning, but you may not see it. You won't see the visible flame. Right? It doesn't have that. So these should be marked with a logo from the manufacturer. A vented fuel cell is in the trunk. And then tactics for a leak and a fire include shutting off the ignition, isolating the fuel from ignition source, chalking the wheels. Do not extinguish, protect your exposures, allow the fuel to burn off. If extrication is required, do not cut the C-post. Okay, so the C-post on the vehicle, the A-post comes down from like the driver's and the passenger side from where the hood is, basically up to the first part of the roof. And then you have like a B-post. If you have two doors, the B-post would come down between the two doors from the roof down to where the doors are. And then the C-post would be from the roof back to the trunk area. All right, so you don't want to cut that C-post because they contain vents. All right. Okay, that's it for vehicle fires. So our next module, we're going to cover exterior Class A fires and then ground cover fires. And then that will conclude our fire suppression. So this lecture concludes part 3 of our fire suppression module. All right, thank you all.